This is my character binder for Triska. She is my Daggerheart character, who is a witch that I am actually helping playtest from the Void, and we've been playing a Strixhaven campaign in Daggerheart for about 4 months or so now. Compared to most campaigns that I am in or run, where we meet monthly and we just play for a really long time for one day, we've been meeting weekly. So I've gotten a pretty good grasp on Daggerheart as a player. I have not run a game of it yet, but I am familiar with the rules now, and I've gotten to understand it more as a player, and I wanted to put forth my ideas now that it has been out for a few months, and I've actually had a chance to play and work with that, because my initial thoughts have changed dramatically since getting used to the system. For context, I am a player in this Daggerheart campaign, though I do want to try running some one-shots in it here in the near future. And predominantly, I play and DM both D&D 2014 and 2024. 5.5, whatever you'd like to call those systems. But in comparison to D&D, I do have a fairly healthy idea of where Daggerheart slots in, for me at least, and what I think you could look forward to or who it is for now, because I've given it multiple hours of play now. Hi folks, I'm Misty, this is Misty Steps. Grab a drink, grab a snack, get comfy, and let's get into it. If you're chronically on D&D YouTube like I am, you've probably heard that Daggerheart is the roleplay heavy RPG, and it is for theater kids by theater kids. And yeah, I'm a theater kid and I love this. This is good. I love the roleplay aspect, I love the vibes, I love that there's not a lot of math. I have a good time as vibes girly. And I think that it is a lot more new player friendly than D&D. Like, had this been out before and I had been familiar with it 2 years ago, when my friends were just starting to get into D&D, when they had never even played D&D or even really knew anything about it aside from that nerds played it, I probably would have pointed them towards this instead, because there's less rules and because it's more of a free form. There are some negatives to that as well, which I'll get into, but I wanted to go over some of the highlights that stick out to me as big positives in this game. So let's start with the positives. Positive 1, it is only 2 damage types, magic or physical. There's not 13 damage types. There's no difference between force versus lightning versus fire. It is all just magic or all just physical. Doesn't matter if it's a sword or a great hammer hitting someone. Some monsters are resistant to magic, others are resistant to physical, and you get to figure out which one is which. But that means that you don't have to remember as many resistances. You do not have to remember as many immunities or weaknesses that you do on a stat block for D&D. This also helps lead into the fact that flavor is everything, and flavor is fun. So, for example, before I decided to do a witch for my Triska character, I was looking at making her a sorcerer, and I was going to do the elemental sorcerer path. And instead of flavoring it as earth, air, fire, water, whatever, like the traditional avatar elements, I could have just made it rot. And I could have went full creepy mushroom cryptid and just flavored it like that, because it doesn't matter in the end, it's still just magic damage. If it says that lightning comes down and strikes something, that's all flavor. It's still taking magic damage, so you can flavor it as mushroom spores creating a cloud instead, just as easily. And it does not change anything aside from flavor. I mentioned before, but there's very minimal math. You roll 2d12 with hope, with fear. That's really all you're having to add up, and then the occasional damage die, whatever you're rolling for damage. The minimal math is also nice as someone who really struggles with math. It is great to not have to do a ton of plus your proficiency, plus your bonus, plus this. The numbers are much more straightforward. Really appreciate that. And there's a lot of ways to use hope and fear, and a lot of ways to force a success. As a witch, I have the ability to use 3 hope and just automatically get a success with fear if it normally would have failed. The fear is still a little scary, but it is a success at least, and that does bounce off of her powers really well. It feels like the domains that they have are very good at synergizing, so I'm very excited to see what else comes from that. I'm really excited to play other domains in the future, because I know we already have another campaign planned ahead. We got to do a world building on that, and I will get into that later. But the domain cards really work well with each other. They really synergize with each character's abilities. My friend plays a syndicate rogue and my husband plays a ranger, and the ranger is truly insane. Like, if you want a really cool ranger, go play Daggerheart instead of D&D. Wow. The rules are very simple. There are some status effects that can happen, but if they happen, it's very simple to know, oh, you add a d6 or you take away a d6 because you're at disadvantage. There's a lot of flow, and it's all about telling a story versus crunchy math numbers. That does come with a downside, though. Now that I've played, I can safely say that the initiative system is not the concern that I thought it was. I truly got hung up on the spotlight system of Daggerheart for a while. That was one of my biggest complaints, was that there's not turns, so I don't know when to go, and it's kind of awkward. But now that we've had a couple, 3 or 4 combats, we've gotten used to it. So yes, it is a learning curve for sure, but it is not a difficult one. And it's one that I think really does benefit well, and we're able to plan really cool team attacks and work together on that. And I think that that's something that's super, super cool that D&D does lack, is that teamwork aspect as a party. But there are a few other things that I think are potential cons to the system, or at least something that I would keep in mind. There are a lot of just DM calls or table-specific calls to make. For example, the fungal ability to look into a memory of someone that is recently deceased. There's no definition as to what recently deceased means, and there is no limit as to how many times you can do that, with the exception of how much stress you have. So, as written, you can pull as many memories as you want from a character, or from a corpse rather, and get as much information as you want out of it. Personally, our DM, we determined that recently deceased meant 12 hours or less, so still a fairly fresh corpse. And we also decided that there was a limit of once per corpse, just because, yes, I could keep playing and I could keep pushing to get more information out of that corpse, but then those memories would eventually become useless, and that just feels like a kind of antagonistic game between the two people, between the GM and the player. So I think that there's conversations to be had for sure as these pop up, and I think that as long as you are in a group with a lot of high trust between the group, I think it should be a non-issue. I would hesitate, though, to run Daggerheart at a convention or at like a, game shop just for randoms to walk in and set up a West Marches type of campaign, because of that rulings versus rules dichotomy. This is much more rulings versus rules, and while that is very fun for a group that we've been playing together for years and we are very familiar with how each other operates and we're willing to have those conversations, I can see where it might rub some people the wrong way if I make a different call than what they would normally expect. Hopefully, you don't have that issue, and if you do run this, please, for the public, please let me know what your experiences are, but I would have hesitations on that for sure. The initiative is messy, though, until you're used to it. Again, it took us 3 or 4 sessions, or 3 or 4 combats, rather, to get used to it. But now that we are used to it, I don't see it as an issue anymore. I actually think it's really cool, all the different things that you can do with this initiative system. The armor also feels kind of weird to me, because it's basically just an additional hit point, so I almost feel like it should be a wound system instead of an HP system, because it's one more thing to cross off. Like, you can use an armor slot to lessen how much damage you take, but you can only do that based on how strong your armor is, but you'll still take some damage, and if you can't block all of the damage, and it gets a little confusing. It's fairly straightforward to me. I don't think that it's unintuitive, but it's clunky, and I think that maybe just making it a wound system might have been easier, or just giving us more HP at that point might have been a good solution. I don't have a perfect solution there. I am not a game designer, but it is something that I noticed. The other potential downside of Daggerheart is that it is heavy in the RP, and if you're not locked in, it can feel a little lacking for characters, at least in our group. Now, our group is very big on RP, we are very big on the roleplay, we absolutely get into our characters, and we have a blast. But if you're having a rough day, it could be exhausting. I would love to hear from people who don't get into their characters as heavily with Daggerheart, how they feel about it, and if they enjoyed it. Did you find yourself more comfortable getting into those characters because you weren't trying to balance mechanics and roleplay? Or is it something where, you know, you could just narrate it and you didn't feel out of place for you? I would love to hear that, because I think that it offers the opportunity for a lot of really cool things to happen. Just, you know, I swing from the chandelier and I'm going to do that to try and smack this guy. You can absolutely do that, and it's not 1,200 checks. It's maybe 2, depending on your DM. At least for my group, it's pretty roleplay heavy, and we absolutely get into it. So it's a little exhausting if you're not fully up to it, or if you're not at 100%. It gets a little rough. I also have mixed feelings on group checks as written, but that's what homebrew is for. I don't know how I feel about group checks as a whole. I think I would rather just do a help action and give someone advantage, but that's what homebrew rules are for, and frankly, I've only had to do that maybe a couple of times, so I would like to get a little bit more group roles under my belt before I make opinions on that. But I do think the icing on the cake for Daggerheart, I think the best thing that they do is their death mechanics. And being able to decide if you get a scar and you survive, or you go out in a blaze of glory or perish, I think that that is so important for good storytelling. I love the idea of, yeah, I rolled bad, I did bad in this fight, I'm downed. But if I don't want to fully die, because this is a low stakes fight and I don't want to die to the Daggerheart equivalent of 2d6 wolves, I don't have to. I can just choose not to. Alternatively, if we're fighting the big bad, and I think that this is a very poignant point, and you know what? If my character can just do this one cool thing, this one crit hit, and save everyone else and do that blaze of glory, that is absolutely worth stepping into the sidelines or letting that character pass on then. I think that the ability to make that call as a player can help really fulfill character stories in a very, very important way, and I'm super excited to see more of that in the future. I also really love their campaign building process. We actually finally created a full campaign frame. Again, our original game, we are currently running Strixhaven. We're not going to probably finish Strixhaven. We're going to do an arc and wrap up this season of Strixhaven, and then probably take a break for the holidays. But then we will be going into a new homebrew campaign for Daggerheart, and we were able to get together, do a full world building session where we got to make a map, figure out what factions are fighting what is the lore of this world, what caused the friction that is currently happening, you know, what caused the assassination of Duke Ferdinand. The World War has not started yet, but it is heating up, and that's a very fun point in a world to be. And I'm super excited to see that world now and see what we can kind of get into based on what kind of characters we make for that campaign. I am super excited. I loved being a player and being able to input that, because now I know as much about the world as someone who's born in it would. And I've got that investment in the world because I got to help make it. And I think that that's something that Daggerheart is really good at, is making players invested and making them care and making them have the ability to make choices, instead of maybe the illusion of choice that GMs will often use behind the screen in D&D, and I'm guilty of that as well, for sure. So in short, I think Daggerheart is great, and I think it's a great beginner RPG. I think it's something that I would love to run more of. I do plan on running a couple of one-shots and maybe a short campaign here in the future once my Wild Beyond the Witchlight group wraps up. Once that wraps, which granted will probably be a while still, but But once that wraps, we've talked about moving into a homebrew Daggerheart campaign, and I think that that is where I will get a lot more insight on that. Otherwise, I'm also hoping to run some one-shots in the future, and while it has some flaws, because I think every system does, no system is going to be perfect for every single person, I do think it is an excellent system, and I'm really looking forward to seeing more done with this system. Obviously, this is not sponsored. I have 150 subscribers at the time of recording this, so I am not big enough for Darrington Press to know I exist. These are all of my own thoughts. I am not getting paid for any of them, but please feel free to like, share, subscribe, comment. I do respond to those, but let me know in the comments below what you think about Daggerheart, or what your favorite parts, or the parts that you've decided to homebrew out, look like. Thanks, and I will see you next time.